Shyama Prasad Mukherji Rurban or Rural Urban Mission. Shyama Prasad Mukherji Rurban Mission is a central government mission which is aimed at turning rural areas into economically, socially and physically sustainable spaces or areas. Now this scheme is supposed to draw an investment of more than 5,000 crore rupees in 3 years to transform rural areas to economically, socially and physically sustainable spaces. Now let us see the details of the mission. The mission aims at development of rural growth clusters which have a latent potential for growth in all the states and union territories and which should trigger overall development in the region. Now, these clusters would be developed by infusing economic activities, developing skills and local entrepreneurship and providing infrastructure amenities as well. The Rural Urban Mission will also thus develop a cluster of smart village. The Rural Urban Mission would replace the provision of urban amenities in rural areas, that is PURA mission, which was initiated by the late President Abdul Kalam. So this mission basically replaces the earlier mission of PURA. This Shyama Prasad Rural Urban Mission would create village clusters, as said before, to minimize also the rural migration to cities through skill development programs, and these clusters would be well delineated areas with the planned layouts which are prepared following the planning norms, and these planning norms could be laid down in the state, town and country planning acts, on similar central government or state statutes as may be applicable, and they would be duly notified in the state and union territories. These plans would be finally integrated with the master plans as the case may be. Now, the state governments would identify these clusters in accordance with the framework for implementation, which would be prepared by the Ministry of Rural Development. Therefore, the Ministry of Rural Development is going to play the key nodal role here. The clusters will be geographically contiguous Gram Panchayats with a population of about 25,000 to 50,000 in the plain and the coastal areas, and with a population of 5,000 to 15,000 in the desert, hilly or tribal areas. And there will be a separate approach for selection of clusters in the tribal and non-tribal districts as well. As far as practical, clusters of the village would follow administrative convergence units of the Gram Panchayats. Now let us see how are the funding provisions made for the scheme. As said before, the mission aims to create 300 such rural urban growth clusters, and that would be done in the next 3 years across the country. The funding for urban clusters will be through various schemes of the government converged into the cluster. The Shyama Prasad Mukherji Rural Urban Mission will thus provide additional funding support of up to 30% of the project cost per cluster as a so-called critical gap funding, and this would be a central share to enable the development of such rural urban clusters. In addition to the critical gap funding, proactive steps also have been taken to ensure the success of the mission with adequate budget provisions to support the state government as well. This support will be towards project development, capacity building and other institutional arrangement at the state level. As regards the institutional arrangement, the mission envisages institutional arrangements both at the state and the center, And the idea is to ensure a smooth implementation of the mission. The mission also has an innovation budget towards facilitating research and development and capacity building. Now let us see in detail what are the components of the Rurban mission. To ensure an optimum level of development, many components have been suggested which are required for the cluster, and this would include, for example, the skill development training linked to economic activities, agro-processing, agri-services, storage and warehousing, digital literacy, sanitation provision of piped water supply, solid and liquid waste management, village street drains, street lights, fully equipped mobile health unit, upgrading school and higher education facilities, inter-village road connectivity, citizen service center for electronic delivery of citizen-centric services or the e-gram connectivity. Then there is a public transport and also LPG gas connection. Therefore, we can see 13 important developmental activities for a rural cluster or a rural development is part of this scheme.